Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Justin Bibelan aka Organizon 118 and welcome to this episode of Learning Biochemistry. Okay, so last week I discussed about the Walter Hayward's projection formula which is the cyclization of monosaccharides. Okay, and I hope that you learned about how to get the anomers of the monosaccharides or the cyclization of monosaccharides and try to get their anomers, the respective anomers, which are the alpha and the beta anomers. Okay, and I hope that you also learn how to name them according to their structural forms. Okay, like for the six-membered ring for aldoses, you are going to name it as a pyranose, while those five-membered ring aldoses you call it as furanose. And for ketoses, that contains six carbons, okay? They are called furanoses. Okay, so I hope that you learned something about the cyclization of monosaccharides or the Walter Hayward's projection formula. Okay, we convert the Fischer projection to Walter Hayward's projection. Okay, for this week's lesson, I will be discussing to you some biologically important monosaccharides. Okay, so biologically important monosaccharides. Monosaccharides are the simplest carbohydrates that have backbones of from 3 to 6 carbons. Okay, so we have already learned about that. And there are many monosaccharides, but we will focus on those that are most common in biological systems. Okay, this includes the 5, 6 carbon and 6 carbon sugars. We have the glucose, the fructose, galactose, ribose, and deoxyribose. So these will be our monosaccharides that we will learn as we go along with this lesson. Okay, so first we are going to talk about the glucose. The glucose is the most important sugar in the human body, of course, because this is our primary source of energy. Okay, remember that glucose is the primary source of energy, and it is found in numerous foods and has several common names, including we have dextrose, grape sugar, and also blood sugar. Okay, so glucose is actually broken down into glycolysis and other pathways to release energy for body functions. Okay, so as we go along with the lessons in biochemistry, at the last part, okay, of this lesson, we will actually go to metabolic pathways. Okay, and this includes the glycolysis, which is actually your glucose is converted into simpler organics biomolecules, simpler biomolecules, which actually releases energy for body functioning. Okay, that's why your glucose is at the primary source of energy. Okay, so the concentration of glucose in blood is critical to normal body function. Okay, as a result, it is carefully controlled by the hormones insulin and glucagon. So the insulin and glucagon are the ones who control the blood glucose level in our body. Okay, is it in a normal blood glucose level or not? Okay, so the blood glucose level or the normal blood glucose level in our body is actually from 100 to 120 milligram per ml. Okay, and the highest concentration of blood glucose, which normally takes place after we eat a meal. Okay, so after we eat a meal, our blood glucose will eventually high, but the hormone insulin stimulates the uptake of the excess glucose by most cells of the body, and after 1 to 2 hours, the levels return to normal. Okay, so after you eat lunch or breakfast or dinner, okay, normally the blood glucose level will rise up, okay, around 120 milligram per ml, okay? But at 1 to 2 hours, the insulin actually stimulates the uptake of the blood glucose concentrations into the cells, and of course, that's why from 1 to 2 hours, the blood glucose level will normalize. Okay, that is actually the what we call the homeostasis, okay, or the homeostasis, or what do you pronounce that? It's actually the homeostasis of inside in our body. It's It's the process of balancing whatever is the excess or whatever is too much in our body. The body has the ability to balance itself. That is what we call the homeostasis. Okay? So, if blood glucose concentrations drop too low, the individual feels lightheaded and shaky. And this happens, the glucagon, okay, the hormone glucagon now stimulates the liver to release glucose into the blood, reestablishing the normal levels, okay, of blood glucose inside our body. Okay, so if we have a what we call the hypoglycemic, okay, that means our blood now is uh, drops too low. That is what we call the hypoglycemic. While when say hyperglycemic, that is actually our blood sugar becomes too high. Okay, so when our body is hypoglycemic, the glucagon now, the hormone glucagon, stimulates the liver to release the blood gluc to release glucose into the blood. Okay, so that is the action of the glucagon. So I have here a figure that illustrates the 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 exchange of the glucose from the blood to back to the liver, then the liver to the blood. Okay, so here we are. If we have a high blood sugar in our body after we eat a meal, or even if you have a condition, is what we call the diabetes. Okay, that is the condition that the our blood where our blood sugar doesn't drop into or doesn't goes back to its normal condition, then probably that you have already what we call the disease called the uh, diabetes. Okay, that means you have, it could be that you have not no enough insulin in your body because if you have a high blood sugar, the insulin from the pancreas, okay, coming from the pancreas, your pancreas will release that insulin in order for that the excess blood sugars, okay, will be converted into glycogen. Okay, a glycogen is actually a polysaccharide. Okay, that means the glucose now, that is our blood sugar, okay, the glucose now will be polymerized. Okay, so it will be linked together. So every blood sugar, excess blood glucose, uh, okay, will be polymerized, will be put together, will be linked together to form of what we call glycogen. Okay, and this glycogen will be stored in the liver, and this is what we call the glycogenesis. Okay, glycogenesis uh, is the formation of glycogen by many or excess glucose units. Okay, so glucose units in the blood will then be polymerized to form a glycogen, and it will be stored in the liver so that your blood sugar will be normalized now. Okay, then if the blood sugar has been drop low, okay, that means it is hypoglycemic, okay, so the glucagon now will stimulate the liver to undergo what we call glycogenolysis. Okay, so glycogenolysis is what we call the breakdown of glycogens into simpler glucose units. Okay, since glycogen are stored in the liver, and if there is not enough blood sugar, okay, the glucagon now will stimulate the liver to to process the glycogen, what we call the glycogenolysis, to break down the glycogen into the blood glucose, and it will be released from the liver to the blood in order to normalize the blood sugar. Okay, so this is what we call uh, the exchange of glucose, okay, from the blood to to the liver, and then to the liver to the blood, okay, by the action of these hormones, which is what we call the insulin coming from the pancreas, and you have your glucagon, which stimulates the liver to release the glucose, okay, from the process of glycogenolysis, which is the glycogen that was stored in the liver. This is actually very important, especially if you are like undergoing some extraneous exercises, or like you are actually doing some uh, extraneous exercises. Okay, so from at the start, or even you are getting to diet, and you need to have some exercises. Okay, because the glucose are actually the ones that will be metabolized first in our body, and after that is the second one, which is the the lipids now. Okay, which is the fats. That is the next one to be metabolized. So you need to metabolize first all the glucose inside their body in order for the fats to be metabolized after that. Okay, so if you have too much glucose in your body, you eat a lot of carbohydrates rich foods, you need a lot of cakes, and you eat a lot of rice. Okay, so that's why it is hard for you to lose fats. Okay, because it needs to be metabolized first. Okay, it needs to be broken down first. And some of the excess glucose are actually stored in the liver, okay? Or in the form of glycogen, okay? If you are doing some strenuous exercises, okay, those glucose levels in your blood will now be drops too low, and there is not enough energy producing uh, carbohydrates in your body. Then therefore that's the time that the glycogen will now be broken down in the process of glycogenolysis, and will be broken down all the glycogen into the glucose units, and to be released to the blood in order for that to be metabolized again to produce energy. So while you are doing some extraneous exercises, the glycogen are actually also broken down, okay, to release glucose to the blood in order for you to have a much energy for that, okay. And it's also, this is also one, also the application of this is what we call the adrenaline rush. Okay, the adrenaline rush is that your hormone adrenaline will also stimulate the glycogen, okay, at emergency purposes. Okay, like for example that you need to get up and drag your refrigerator because it's already flooding. Okay, then you need to get up and you need to drag your TV. Okay, that is what we call adrenaline rush. Okay, the adrenaline there, the hormone adrenaline, will eventually stimulate the liver to release tremendous amount of glucose in order for your body to produce a lot of energy so that you can drag a heavy materials or heavy objects. Okay, so that's it. Okay, now let's move to the second monosaccharide, which is what we call the fructose. The fructose is as also called levulose, and it is a fruit sugar, and it is the sweetest of all sugars, and it's found in large amounts in honey, okay, in corn syrup, and sweet fruits. Okay, so those that the honey, okay, or we even call it as dugus, okay, here in the Philippines. So it's the sweetest of all sugars because it contains fructose. Okay, the structure of fructose is similar to that of glucose, but your fructose is actually a ketose. Okay, because it has a functional group of a ketone. Okay, then you have we already knew about this in last week that we convert the Fischer projection of the fructose into two anomers of it. We have your alpha and the beta fructose. Okay, alpha and the beta D fructose. Okay, the next one is the galactose. Okay, so the galactose is another important hexose that is found in biological systems as a component of the disaccharide. So we will be talking about disaccharides next week. Okay, the disaccharide lactose, or what we call the milk sugar. Okay, so sugar in milk of the most mammals. Okay, so most mammals contains this lactose, which contains the monosaccharide galactose. Okay, lactose is actually the combination of glucose plus galactose. Okay, so we will know later on what would be the structure of the lactose and other common disaccharides. Okay, so another thing is that galactose is also in a modified form eh, uh, can be converted into a beta D and acetyl galactosamine, which are actually components of the blood group antigens. Okay, these antigens are actually what we call the blood types, the type O, type A, and type B. Okay, the composition of our blood types compose the formation or the modified form of the beta D galactose, which is the beta D and acetyl galactosamine. Okay. So this is the formula or the structure of the beta D and acetyl galactosamine. So there is the formation of the amide here, okay? So we already knew about that in organic chemistry, that this is the functional group of an amide. You have your carbonyl and the amine group there. That is your uh, functional group of an amide, okay? Then you have your N, acetyl. So there is an acetyl group here, that is N-acetyl, and this is your beta D galactose. Okay, so that the name would now imply to the beta D and acetyl galactosamine. Okay, the last one is the ribose and the deoxyribose. Okay, so these are 5 carbon sugars, but they are also very important and aldoses. Okay, why? Because ribose is actually a component of many biological important molecules that includes the genetic or the genetic materials, okay? The DNA and of course the RNA, okay? The ribonucleic acids and the deoxyribonucleic acids, okay? And various coenzymes, a group of compounds required by many of the enzymes that carry out biochemical reactions, okay? So this is a very important monosaccharides because these are actually includes they are actually found in various coenzymes, okay? And without these enzymes, some of the biochemical processes in our body or reactions would not eventually happen, okay? So, and also ribose and deoxyribose are main components or the sugars that are actually found in the DNA and also in the RNA, okay? So the DNA, the molecule that carries the genetic information of the cell, contains the 2-deoxyribose. So this is your D-ribose. So the D-ribose now is actually present in the ribonucleic acids or the RNA, while your beta D2-deoxyribose is actually found in the DNA, okay, which contains the genetic information, okay. So that's why your ribose and deoxyribose are important monosaccharides also.